Do you want tips and ideas for getting the most out of your paper pads while making your Christmas cards this year? Hi, I'm Jess from JessCrafts.com, and I'm going to help you make the most of your crafty supplies and time. So let's get started. Today, I'm working with the Michaels Recollections 6x6 Safe Freeze collection. There's a couple of different 6x6 pattern paper pads out there this year from Michaels. I started with this one, and I'm hoping to maybe show you a few more. I know that for some people, these paper pad videos can be kind of frustrating because they're not available in your country. I think they're only available in the US and Canada. But I also know that a lot of people request to see these because they are readily available and not everyone can order online either. So it's kind of just a mix. I have other paper pads that are more widely available, that are available online. And yeah, this is just for those that have requested seeing something from a big box store because that is what they personally have access to. So I also picked up a die cut collection. This one, it came in this big plastic tub, which I didn't quite realize because I did one of those like buy online, pick up in store situations. And it's a lot of extra room. It's not full by any means, but the die cuts are nice. They have a little bit of foiling detail, a lot of them, and I'm happy to use them on the cards, but just a little bit bummed about the lot of plastic packaging. However, it's reusable plastic packaging, so I'm sure you could find something, to store in your craft room, etc. The style of them is a little bit different. Some of them are more cartoony and others are a little bit more vintagey. So that could be an inconsistency for some people, but I do think that this paper pad has a good variety and nothing seemed like it wouldn't go with this paper pad as long as I paired it with the right pattern paper. I'm going to get started easy here. I knew I wanted to use these 3x3 squares because there were two papers in the collection that you could cut apart into 3x3 squares. I looked in my One Sheet Wonder stash of sketches. So there's all kinds, there's like up to almost 30, I think, that you can download over on my website. And you can print them out and it will tell you exactly how to cut your paper and exactly how to assemble them. I picked One Sheet Wonder number 24 because it included a 3x3 square. And then I cut paper that had the 3x3 squares. I cut all the 3x3 squares. And then my complementing paper, which was this mistletoe paper, I cut the second half of the One Sheet Wonder, which is a long rectangle followed by a smaller rectangle. When you see the sketch, I hope it will be pretty clear how I was able to combine two sheets on the one design. I didn't cut every paper exactly as the sketch suggests. Instead, I combined two papers. I'm going to lay the strip down the center, and my mistletoe paper has a clear top and bottom. This became a slight issue because in the sketch, I suggest turning that smaller rectangle onto its narrow side, but in order to make it work, because there's a clear top and bottom, I'm going to have to keep it as a wide rectangle. Not a big deal, not a big change to the sketch, but just so you know, if my measurements look a little off, it is because I made that slight modification, and I'm going to use the wider side. I'm also putting a little bit of cardstock on the edges of my square because I want them to be propped up and nice and even and as they lay across that stripe in the middle. And I'm going to do that several times throughout this video. So if you see me adding little bits of cardstock to the back of different elements, that's always what it's going to be. It's going to be me just making sure everything is nice and smooth and even across the top. And I wound up making 16 of that card. Oh no, it was 8 of that because there were 2 pages with 4 elements each. Next up, there was a pattern paper in the collection that had a snowman in the corner and then like this fancy frilly border, as you can see on the back there. And I thought about it for a while and I could not come up with an idea for how to use that side of the pattern paper. Luckily, it's a double-sided pattern paper, so I decided to use the other side. However, in this video, I will show you several ways for how you can use some of the bigger, bolder patterns that are in the collection. This is One Sheet Wonder number 19, and I'm going to pick 2 designs, which will be a total of 4 sheets, and then each sheet will make 2 cards, so it's a total of 8 cards with this. And there'll also be pictures on my blog that will show you exactly I'll show you the whole mass of cards that I made with each. So there'll be like a picture that has all 8 cards or however many I make of any individual design. But I'm going to adhere that to these cardstocks to create mats. And all the mat measurements are right there on the sketches for you. But in this case, This is like a little bit more tricky because you're cutting around these banner shapes. So what I like to do is, because these banners are 3 inches wide, I cut a 3¼ inch wide by 8.5 because that's the size my paper comes in. And also my paper, my cardstock is Recollections cardstock, also available at Michael's. It's from a red pack, most of it. And then there's some other, like there's some from a green pack, etc. But I don't know if they have names. Anyway, I am just going to trim around it with my scissors rather than measuring it specifically. I'm kind of just eyeballing it because it is much harder to measure everything exactly before I lay the mat on. Before I lay the pattern paper on. So I'm putting the pattern paper on and then trimming away that excess on the top and bottom. Again, adding that little bit of cardstock behind just because I want everything to be nice and smooth and even. It gives it a more finished look and a little bit more thought because, you're not letting everything bump off the edge, etc. A challenge was, though, that with that snowman paper, on the back were the ornaments. The ornaments have a clear top and bottom again. So I, in the design, in the sketch, say, put the arrow facing down, but for those, the ornaments would be upside down. So I put the arrows facing up. If you look at the blog, you'll see how those turned out and what I mean by that. But I just kind of adapted and made it work. This is One Sheet Wonder number 26. This is great for when you have a pattern that is large and in like the bottom corner or top corner of a page. So this had these poinsettias that were really large, and over there in the top corner of the page, in the One Sheet Wonder, you cut off this like really big chunk and then a little strip, and that little strip is where I'm going to mount my sentiment from Paper Rose. It is part of the Christmas sentiment pack, and so instead of having to stamp a sentiment onto cardstock and cut it out and all that, they have them already printed, and they have them black on white background or white on a black background, which I find to be really convenient. There's also stamps out there that let you stamp and cut a bunch of sentiments, but if you don't have anything like that, don't worry about it. Especially this pattern paper, it is perfect to stamp a sentiment right on, so whatever sentiments you have in your stash will work well. Next up is when I start having to get more creative and making new sketches and new One Sheet Wonders to accommodate this particular paper pad. So here I have this truck. I think he looks cool. I want to figure out a way to use him. I don't want to just turn it over and use the backside. And my original thought was to pull in a One Sheet Wonder that I had previously designed, but it was going to cause me to cut the truck into a smaller piece than I would have preferred. So I came up with a new One Sheet Wonder, and this is the first of 3 new One Sheet Wonders you're getting in this video. And I'm going to show you 2 new sketches. They are using up the scraps that I have because this pattern paper pack does come with a sheet that has like all these little tiny cut aparts, and I just use those for embellishment rather than as a One Sheet Wonder. But when I have those scrap embellishments at the end, I will show you what I mean and how that works. So to make this work, this one is an A2 size, but to make some of the other designs work, I am going to be switching up. So far, I've only been doing A2 size cards, and I'm going to switch up to some Slimline and 5x7s to make this paper pad work. And in general, that is a big recommendation that I came up with having tried to make this pattern paper work, is if I wanted to use some of these bigger, bolder designs, I was going to have to give up on the idea of only making A2 size cards. And I just default to A2 size cards because you can cut them easily from 8.5 by 11 cardstock, not because they're inherently better. So here I'm kind of showing you my design process. Like, am I kind of thinking like, how am I going to arrange this? How am I going to have this turn out into a One Sheet Wonder? And so now here in the corner, you see that printed out One Sheet Wonder because I paused what I was doing and went and designed it on the computer and printed it off to finish off this card. That snow blessed, that little sentiment that's blue there, that is from that cut apart sheet that I mentioned. And it's not part of the One Sheet Wonder design because you don't get it if you cut off a 6x6 piece of paper to make this design. It's extra. However, I know most of us have plenty of extra things in our stash, and you could, instead of adding that snow blessed, you could be adding one of the like embellishments or one of the sentiments from the Paper Rose set or whatever you're working with. if it's a little bit misleading, like, oh, where'd that extra piece of paper come from? I just want to be clear. It is because I added it from the cut aparts that are part of the same paper pad, but it is not part of the One Sheet Wonder. This, I felt like, really helped me showcase the truck part of that pattern paper. And then if you look on the blog, you'll see how I also incorporated the chunk of the pattern paper that had the snow-covered trees. Next up, this pattern paper, it took me a while to figure out how I was going to work with this. This one challenged me because the backside does work well. I could just use snowflakes, but I really thought that that little snow family was cute. However, it had this long sentiment on the bottom, and I knew that I did not want to use that sentiment as is because it didn't really, in my mind, work as a card sentiment, but also make a really big rectangle. So I came up with Slimline One Sheet Wonder number 8. And I originally, and in this card, you'll see that they are 1/4 inch mats. And that's in part because I had to make this very particular design work where I had to cut off that word or those words along the bottom. But in general, I will be doing it with a 1/4 inch mat because I prefer 1/4 inch mats. If you like 1/8 inch mats, I'm pretty sure all my designs work with 1/8 inch mats. I don't want to say for sure because who knows if something funky's happened there, but there's no reason that they shouldn't that I can think of. But I just like 1/8 inch mats because I like to craft fast. And when you craft fast, you sometimes don't make everything perfect. Sometimes your cuts are a little off. Sometimes you don't line things up perfectly. You see there, I had to just peel it up again because I got it a little bit crooked. And so because I don't mind that things look homemade, I like to give myself a little bit of room, a little bit of grace to make sure that it still looks as good as it can under the fact that I just am, like I said, inherently a fast crafter. And again, I'm going to take the 2 extra squares. This One Sheet Wonder, something important to note, is it makes 1 slimline card for 1 sheet of 6x6 paper. So I cut off the tops of those trees, and then I use the back side of the paper to finish off. That creates those 2 3x3 squares that everything is laid on top of. So all the previous cards, I cut 1 sheet of paper to make 2 cards. In this case, I'm just going to get the 1 card out of it. I'm going to go back to my Paper Rose Crisp Christmas sentiments and pick a longer sentiment to make it work here. You could, of course, just go to sentiments in your stash. I find that takes a little bit longer because then I have to search through all my stamp sets. It's a little bit faster to search through 1 pack of Christmas sentiments. Okay, these are the hard papers. These are the ones that I seriously spent days thinking about before I actually went ahead and came up with a design. And I'm not even sure that I love my design. It just worked and I had to give it up. I had to eventually give up and just kind of go with it. All right, that Merry and Bright paper is a big old 6x6 sentiment. I couldn't figure it out. I gave up. I'm using the backside. This other sheet, though, that has the trucks and the snowmen or snow people, I knew I could make that work. However, I couldn't use the backside of it because the backside of it has this scalloped pattern all over it. So what I wound up doing was cutting off the top that says Happy Holidays and the bottom that has the snowman and truck. And that's going to be the focal point of this card. But then I took the Merry and Bright paper and I'm going to use the back side of it as the extra. So the sketch shows you making it all out of 1 piece of paper, but I am again combining 2 different papers. And then here I kind of went against what I just said and I found a stamp. But this is because this is the MFT Itty Bitty Holiday stamp set, which I did get in the middle of making this video. So I didn't have it when I first started, but I liked that it has a bunch of holiday sentiments all in 1 set so that I didn't have to keep flipping through to find something perfect for each thing. There was just a bunch of choices. And in this case, a lot of the sentiments from the Paper Rose set, I just felt like might not stand out or were a little bit too big for the gap that was left on this particular pattern paper. So I did bring in a stamp set as well. And again, mostly just it's just use whatever you have. I'm focusing on ideas for using pattern paper here. And I hope that you can see if you have a pattern paper pack you picked up and it has these really large, weird designs, hopefully you can adapt some of my ideas to the particular paper pad that you have. Or if you have this paper pad, just go ahead and copy some. So here is what's left of the paper pad. Also, again, on the blog, how many I made of each card, because I did forget to say sometimes, it is written on the blog. So you know how many of each card it makes. And there are 40 Christmas cards in all today. Here are my scrap cards. I have these little cut-aparts left. I had some that were larger shapes and some that were like really tiny strips. So I thought I could combine this large tag with the snowman with 2 tiny strips. And I want to go back to A2 size cards. A2 size cards are definitely my go-to for scraps because they are small. Mini Slimlines also work pretty well because there's not a lot of space to cover. And those are usually 3 inches by 6 inches. And an A2 is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. That's the size of the card front for each of them. I think this would work on a mini Slimline too. You would just get a little bit more space at the top and bottom, but then less space on the sides. So if you think this is a little bit too much white space, maybe switch to the mini Slimline instead. And this becomes a sketch. So I will give you the sketch, the measurements and everything on my blog as well. I think it's going to be called sketch number 24, but it doesn't have a template for how to cut the paper. It just has a final sketch, so that if you are happening to follow along with this tutorial, then you can perfectly use up your pattern paper and have no scraps at the end of this pattern paper pack. But if you're not following along exactly, it's just an idea for scraps that maybe you can use when you pull out any random scraps you have in your collection and just try these little scrap-based cards. The sentiment that I use, the Be Joyful from the MFT stamp set, is going to come in handy here again because I do have this just teeny tiny bit of space. The paper rose sentiments again would have been too big, and I think it looks nicer to stamp directly onto that little strip of pattern paper. There was a tag on the back and a sentiment on the back of the square and the rectangle, but I didn't want those, so I flipped it to the other side. I highly recommend double-sided paper so that you can do these kind of things. If you found this video inspiring, here's another video where you can find more ideas for enjoying your crafty time and supplies. Let me know if you like this video with a share to your crafty community. Subscribe and click the bell so you don't miss the next template or tutorial, and check out the video description for product links. See you in the next video.